Yes, my name again is Jeanne Bernstein, and I'm very happy to welcome you to tonight's last session before our summer break. Just to let you know right from the beginning, we will have our next session on a rather remarkable date, but it's going to be September 11th. We're going to pick up again and have a new round of sessions. And as we have done in the past, I'll summarize the case from last time, which probably many of us have forgotten, just to make the links with different cases. And then we have Oleksandr Filts finally present his case, which I think he planned to do for many, many months, but you always made room for others. So this time it's up to you to present the case. So thank you very much. And thank you again, Oksana, for translating everything for us. So I looked at the case presentation from from May again last night, and it was quite an interesting one because it was one where a therapist from Lviv, Katarina, presented as a case that seemed to initially develop very, very slowly. It was a patient that she had, she started giving us, asking us 3 different questions. She wanted to know whether she had acted ethically correctly by giving her 3 presents. And this question dominated the discussion for quite a while. Whether it was, in our opinion, the right thing to do to give this patient who was diagnosed with a very sincere cancer diagnosis and who was probably going to die. I don't know if she has by now, whether it was okay to give her this. So for a while, it was hard for all of us to sort of get into the history of this case. And after I think especially Françoise and Jerry calmed her down and said, yes, it was the right thing to do, that she had given her 3 gifts, a bag, a fox pillow, and a soap scent smelled like coffee. All very sensitive gifts to things that this woman could not either use anymore or drink anymore or sit down anymore. We got a little bit of the history of this case, and this was a 46-year-old woman who had lived in Ukraine but had left Ukraine in 2018 and married a Russian man, and with whom she was married for about 6 years. And then he died, and so she continued to live in Russia, far away from Ukraine. I forgot the name of the city. And but she started the therapy with Katarina in Ukraine, and was very critical of Ukraine and insulting her with saying that she, the therapist, was one of the Bandites, so one of the adherents to Bandera. And so they got into quite a political struggle and strife. And as she said early on, and we couldn't quite understand it, she was ready to throw the phone out the window because she couldn't bear talking to her anymore. But then when the invasion occurred in 2020, things changed very much. Rather than saying, you Ukrainians, you deserve what's coming, and you Ukrainians, you suppress the Russian language. She, in fact, moved back to Ukraine and began the therapy again with her. And that was the period that these presents occurred, and that we also learned a little bit about her history, which was that she had a father who was very abusive to her. She had been raped when she was 18 years old, and through the help of Jerry and Françoise, we were able to understand that this marriage to this Russian man was a sort of an escape away from this very brutal Ukrainian father, and as a sort of way to rescue herself and to help herself. So she, with this very severe diagnosis, she ended up seeing Katarina regularly every week. And each time, this was also quite significant, each time, neither one of them knew whether they were going to be there for the next session, because on one hand, Katarina was living in Kiev and near some of the buildings that had been destroyed by the Russians. So she really did not know whether she was going to be alive for the next session. And the patient, on the other hand, also didn't know whether she would be alive for the next session because of the cancer. So it felt very present and very real. I remember I returned to the question of why this question of whether she had given the patient these three gifts was so important, and why we couldn't get away from this. When we had sessions after sessions saying extraordinary things are asked for under these extraordinary times, and it turned out that. She was really in a conflict between what I ended up calling the psychoanalytic propaganda. She was very intimidated by the rules that apply for maybe regular therapies and neurotic disorders, but not for such unusual cases as we heard that. Don't know what that is. Anyway, so this initially a rather slow-moving discussion turned actually into very interesting sessions, because we came up, as Oleksandr also said at the very end, inventing some new terms to understand this case. One was being this idea of a psychoanalytic propaganda, after she had talked about all the Russian propaganda that was put into this woman's head. We also talked, thanks to Michael Feldman and Françoise, about the difference between transference in intertransference, so the transference that happens in between sessions, and how important a part that became of this case. We talked about the idea that both of them, both the therapist and the patient, were quote unquote taming each other, maybe even taming their political convictions. And then, not to go on for too long, we ended up with a wonderful saying by Martin Cooperman, of I think a friend and big influence on Françoise and Jerry, who said that that when things are so difficult, said that the patient comes in with symptoms and the analyst comes in with a technique, and if things go well, they are both coming out of hiding. Another thing that Cooperman says is that analysis takes a week, but it takes years to get to that week. So with these sayings and speaking to the difficulty of treating this woman who is about to die and treating it under the conditions of war, I want to give it over to Oleksandr, who is finally able to present this case today. So, thank you.
Jeanne, just before you do,
Yeah.
could I add a footnote to that report?
Yes, please.
And it was a thought I had afterward that yes, there is psychoanalytic propaganda, but you could also make a case that what was being called the traditional psychoanalysts in that therapist's mind was standing in the place of the patient's abusive father.
Yes, you made that point. Yes, you're right.
So that's also worth our keeping in mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You linked the father to that. Yeah. Thank you
Sure.
for adding this. Okay, Oleksandr, will you show your image and no, you will. And Oleksandr will talk a little bit about the current very despairing situation in the Ukraine before he will present his case that he has been waiting to present to us for a while.
Where is
Wait and see. I only see the name for now. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Greetings to everyone. But please, can you let me share the screen just for the sake of my comfort, because I don't have good enough glasses and it will be easier for me to read it from the screen. So can you please let me share the screen?
You can share.
Yes, sir.
Just share as you did before.
Okay, we are waiting for the text to appear on screen.
It's the green share button in the middle.
We have to wait a little bit.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I've been helped. Okay, this is a long story. A long therapy that had breaks, and it started back in 2008. And to describe that story, maybe fully would have been impossible. So I tried to focus on main points to approach the present problem I would like to present in this case. I think that I'll tell you a little bit about the patient's previous history, and that history is somehow related to what Jerry said at the end of today's introduction, what we did, what we defined so beautifully last time, that perhaps analytic therapy lasts a week, but it takes years to read. I would say that this therapy is even more focused. Perhaps therapy boils to one single phrase, but you cannot read this phrase easily. So I'll try to show you how we managed to find this phrase, this patient twice, And this time I cannot do it. So this is why I would like to have your advice. How this patient can be
And
helped.
can I just interrupt? Can we slow down a little bit because it's a little hard to understand?
Yes, and the voice, for us, the voice,
And the volume is not very high, yeah.
the voice of Oksana is at the same level for us as the voice of Oleksandr, and so
Yeah.
it's difficult to listen to Oksana for us.
You can use the original speaker in the translation menu. That helps a lot. If you click on English, you can mute the original voice.
We can.
I did put it in English.
What should we do?
If,
We just continue, okay? We'll do it slow.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Englisch ist genau hier und dann Original-Audio stumm.
Original stumm. Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, danke.
Mhm. So I would call this case the mummification of emotions.
The mummy,
Mummification, like mummifying, becoming like Egypt mummy.
yeah.
Okay, so this patient, he is around 50 now. He's in the military. On the outside, he looks friendly and gentle in nature. He is quite handsome, the kind of good looks that is often seen in images of positive members of society. A universal portrait of a good person, so to speak. Modest, reserved, socially unremarkable, obedient and inconspicuous. But at the same time, inclined to hypernormativity and correctness in his actions, and even in thoughts and fantasies. One of the central problems of the long-term relationship with this patient was to persuade him to associate freely in therapy, which he wouldn't allow himself to do in any way. Okay, a quote from him, what he said. Because free fantasy could lead to God knows what thoughts, which, in my opinion, the patient says, are not only disturbing or dangerous, but also unacceptable. And he often repeated that phrase.
Can you send it again, the phrase he
That
said?
he, because he he believed that associating freely could lead him to God knows which thoughts, which could be not only disturbing or dangerous, but also unacceptable.
Okay.
My overall metaphoric impression of him during the time we knew each other didn't really change. I saw him as a straight, symmetrical, and medium height tree in a dense forest. But it would be difficult to notice him while walking through the forest, because this straight tree would not stand out in any way, just like the rest of trees. At the same time, in therapeutic relationship, he always presented himself as a person with dignity and a sense of inner decency and honesty of feelings. He was sincere in his thoughts. Although his thoughts reflected his rational view of the world. And surprisingly, he possessed natural warmth towards other people and high tolerance of these people's shortcomings and weaknesses. And overall, he had a high empathic understanding of people. There were two things that were surprising about him to me. First, he was a lawyer, and he still is partly, with a strong sense of justice. And this sense of justice is more legal and socially rational than emotional and sensual. So he's rationally just. And at the same time, he had a specific ability to empathize with the emotional experiences of others, especially when those others were having a difficult time in life. So he would empathize with everyone except himself. And this resulted in his attempts to turn towards psychological coaching. And so he tried to learn psychological coaching before the war. He got enrolled in a psychology faculty. And so despite the difficulties of his psychological view of the world, he went to study psychology. And the second thing that surprised me was his exaggerated social normativity, which reaches the level of stubbornness in sticking to his inner convictions. So he's really stubborn about his inner convictions, but this stubbornness does not reach the level of paranoia. You cannot say that it's paranoid. It's just he's being very rigid about inner convictions. So generally, he gives the impression that the tree of his life is gradually withering and drying up, as if unable to break through with its branches to the sun, among other more aggressive and arrogant trees. And so he's failing to break through to the sun, even though he has no shortage of resources and strength. It also seemed to me that his strength and his resources were completely blocked by his internal taboos. The taboos no one ever helped him overcome. He was born and raised in Lviv. His father left the family shortly after his birth. And so his mother, his older sister, and himself were left in rather difficult financial situation. he only got back in touch with his father in his 30s. And now he even has a trusting relationship with his father, although these relationships are not regular, they are sporadic. In preschool and early school age, he was raised by his strict grandmother and his wise grandfather on his mother's side. They also helped the family financially. For example, his grandfather sold his car to pay for his grandson's tutors before he got into university. And so they treated him with warmth and friendly care. And they became good options for him in the future. This is how he describes them. His mother was an inconsistent and somewhat confused woman. She never had any patience for her son, but she loved him in her own way. Although she was not able to express her feelings. That's important. And he mentions this quite often, that she didn't know how, so he didn't learn how. He does not consider his childhood traumatic. Although his mother, who was often inconsistent and capricious, began to abuse alcohol after her divorce to the point of it becoming a problem, a health problem. After divorcing the patient's father, she remarried, partly because the patient's future stepfather was able to help the family financially. The patient established a normal relationship with his stepfather. Well, rather normal, that's how he puts it. He perceived his stepfather as a senior partner in the fight against his mother's alcoholism. So they fought together against her disease, and he was always ashamed of his mother's behavior. That's also important. And he learned to hide his emotional experiences so that no one could ever guess about them. This is what he said. Well, people pretended not to see anything about his mother. And he says, I pretended not to know anything either. This eventually became my second nature and my life creed. This is something he said at the beginning of therapy, and then he stated that repeatedly many times there afterward. After school, following the advice of his stepfather, who was a socially adept businessman, he decided to study law. And he achieved this through his own efforts and hard work, and also helped financially by his grandfather. He got a job as a legal advisor at a bank at the age of 25. He started earning good money, and this was when he rationally decided it was time to form relationships with women. And since he was socially reserved, if not timid, he allowed himself to be tempted into making acquaintances. And since he was good looking, there was no difficulties in this. The first woman he liked became his chosen one. After 3 years of dating, the question of marriage arose, but his future wife suddenly began to distance herself from him, saying that he was too boring and too correct for her, that she lacked emotion, drive, and feelings of love. So they were talking about breaking up, which was equal to disaster for him. And this is when, for the first time in 2007, he sought focused therapy help. And his request for therapy was how he could maintain a relationship, keep a relationship with a woman he was capable of loving, in his words. But like his mother, he did not know how to let her know about it. So the first therapy lasted 4 months and it proved successful because his relationship became stable and ended in marriage, in which 2 children, a son and a daughter, were born. He has good relationship with his children, even though they were divorced after all. In the first therapy, the problem was to unlock the imagination and fantasies that his future lacked in him so much. And this could not be achieved due to all the taboo barriers we talked about and his acquired ability to isolate emotions. The patient quite clearly perceived me as his grandfather, who should give him some wise recipe for future relationships with his wife. And I understood the limited time for therapy because he said he could not afford to stay in therapy for quite a while. And then looking at his existing resource, both of the patient and mine, I suggested that he recount his dreams because he had difficulty free associating, but he had plenty of dreams. So he was just coming with his dreams. And this could give us access to the unconscious world of his family. One of the dreams, as it happens, proved decisive. I'll be brief. In the dream, he owns an old vintage Mercedes. It is parked in the garage, in his garage, and is rarely used. He seems to know how to drive it, but he hasn't used it for the past 3 years. And this actually equaled the duration of his relationship with his girlfriend who wanted to dump him.
Can you say again this? I did not understand. 3 years?
In the dream he hasn't used the car for 3 years, and 3 years was the duration of his relationship with his girlfriend. So that was the first therapy. That was when she wanted to break up with him, and so after staying 3 years with him, okay?
Yeah.
And so he wasn't using the car because he did not know where his driver's license is. And in the dream, he asks his stepfather, who seems like a really cool man in the dream, who is able to master any car. And after that, he told me that it was partly his stepfather and partly myself as his therapist. So he asked his stepfather to show him how to drive this Mercedes because he had forgotten how to do it. The stepfather quickly got to grips with this car and drove off, leaving the patient with nothing. Over the course of 3 sessions, we were working on this dream that seemed really important to the patient. 2 phrases about the dream turned out to be effective in retrospect, just 2 phrases. Although I did not attach any special meaning to them, I sort of said them by accident. The first phrase was that an old vintage car is valuable when you know how to drive it. And the second thought that I said was that in order to drive your favorite car, you need to have your driver's license and own the car. And at this point, the therapy was over with a positive result. And afterwards, he came to me in a few weeks and he said, you know, after we talked about my dream, I thought that it's important to understand what it is that I really want, that I have a right to deal with things I love and not listen to what I can be allowed to do. So this, he realized that he was able to be braver in his relationship. After his mother died in 2014, he lost his mother to cancer, and he found it quite difficult to cope with her death. So he decided to mobilize out of his own will. He left his comfortable job out of his inherent sense of social justice. And while at war, he suffered his leg injury and returned home. But again, his wife announced her desire to end the relationship. Her argument was the same as before. The patient was emotionally dry and he was unable to love properly. That's a quote. And he sought focused help again. He came after 8 years while already in the process of divorce. And his request for therapy was rather unusual. How to plan his further life if he was not able to go beyond his moral principles, which had been reinforced after a serious injury and the tragic death of his battle buddy in front of him. And he also, after that, he turned to religion. He became really religious. He believed that God had saved him then because his combat buddy perished just a few meters from.
Oksana, would you be able to repeat what the request was? I'm sorry, I couldn't hear this very well.
Okay, so his request, while he was in the middle of his divorce, so his request for therapy was he wanted to get help with planning his future life because he could not go beyond the moral principles. Well, that will be said because he had зараз хвильку. It was related to him, to his desire to be faithful to his wife, although she wanted to divorce him, something like that. We'll see in the process, okay?
Okay.
But I did not understand. He went to war? Because there were...
Yes, he did go to war after his mother's death in 2014. Okay, so marriage to his wife and relationship with his children have become a sacred duty of fidelity to his conscience and to his religious beliefs and religious requirements. Therefore, he couldn't imagine, couldn't fantasize about any other relationship. and again. One of the sessions was helpful when I was feeling like his grandfather habitually. I guess I was annoyed by his stubbornness. I said that it was not his relationship with his wife that he was putting the taboo on and burying them, but he was burying his own ability to love again. At the next session, he came and said that it had suddenly become clear to him that it was not his breakup of his marriage that was a sin, but forbidding himself to love another woman. And with that, he left his therapy and completed his long divorce process, because before he was delaying his divorce. Okay, the third time he came to me, which was related to the previous one. However, with the outbreak of full-scale invasion, he came to me for the third time, and now he brought a problem that I'm still unable to solve. This is what I would like to present for the supervision. After the invasion, he was mobilized again. And because of his wound, he had the opportunity to to serve in the rear, not at the front line. So he agreed to serve in the TCC, that's the Territorial Conscription Center. That's where people are recruited to go to war. And here he performs the functions of the center deputy. But by the silent agreement, he performs the direct duties of his supervisor. And his duties include notifying families of the death of their relative, usually a child, well, a son probably, or a husband. So he notifies people about death, and he agreed to perform this function of the herald of death. Because first of all, he considered himself restrained, sufficiently restrained in his emotions. Because since youth, he had always been able to control his emotions when he was embarrassed, right, and intimidated. And secondly, he knew that everyone in such a job drinks themselves to death from the unbearable experience of human grief. He knew that people did. But he himself hated alcohol, which had destroyed his mother. So he knew that he wasn't going to relieve this burden by drinking. That was impossible for him. So he took this discipline, and he thought he could cope with other people's grief because he knew how to deal with his own difficult experiences. However, as it turned out, in reality, he was bitterly mistaken. But there was
bitterly. He was
in
bitterly.
reality, he understood he had been mistaken, that it would be easy for him, but there was no turning back. So each of his visits is accompanied by disturbed sleep, and he has a heavy sense of guilt towards the bereaved families. And he's also not able to contain, and he uses the word contain because he has a second education in psychology, that he cannot contain the aggression of people crushed by grief. And often he feels like an angel of death in the guise, in the clothes of the devil's advocate. And most importantly, he feels that the remnant of his emotionality, which he tried to recover after his divorce with his wife, so his emotions are drying up, and he is turning into a mummified, rational creature, incapable of recovery. Even after he is able to come to therapy once a week and try to vent a little at sessions after a hard week of work, when he has to inform people about the death of their loved ones every day. So he puts it this way: his inner world is not frozen emotions. It's not his emotions freezing, but his emotions drying up. Because the term frozen emotions is really prevalent now. He says, my emotions are not frozen, they are drying up. And this is what scares him. Because right now, when there's a woman who has sincerely and devotedly fallen in love with him, and he seems to like her as well, and maybe, as he puts it, he's capable of loving her in return. Just now, he is forced to say no to her, and he suffers from that. But he also understands that he cannot respond to this woman anyway and offer her anything. He is only capable of hurting her with his mummified emotions. And therefore, with deep disappointment in himself, he is forced to deny himself any possibility of building a new relationship. This is what he is in therapy for. This is what he is in therapy for, and I don't really know how to deal with it. And our previous therapies were solved by incidental phrases, like Jerry said, 1 week of and years before. And here I just don't know what I can do for him. And I don't know how to help him in a situation when every time his traumatic experience of being this herald of death, someone who brings news of death, is renewed each day. And every time I have to search for words, and my countertransference feelings, I have to search for these words and my feelings in a relationship with this emotional mummy who is aware of his condition. The only thing we agree on is that the so-called frozen emotion, quote unquote, can somehow be thawed and revived, for example, by adding some. But if the emotions are mummified, warmth is harmful. So what do you do with the emotional world that is drying up and losing all its life-giving richness is beyond me. Many psychoanalysts like Melanie Klein, she spoke about defensive emotional alienation, and Dionne wrote about undigested affect, or like just defense against affect. And also many philosophers like Kierkegaard and Nietzsche and Kafka and Musil, they wrote about isolated affects or a diminished emotional charge as in freezing, or they see it either as freezing or dissociation. Is this something similar, or is it something fully understood? Something that emerges as an inevitable response to constant, unrelenting, and insurmountable psychological trauma in the face of an irreparable tragedy. So this is my question. if his question, if his emotions are not frozen but are mummified and deteriorating, and every time he finds it harder to recover. So I don't really know what to do about this. This is my question for you today.
Thank you, Oleksandr, for a very moving portrait of your patient whom you've seen for 20-something years, right? Since 2008. 17 years. So it's interesting because mummified emotions are not exactly, it's a new vocabulary to add to our stock of new inventions. But what are mummified emotions compared to frozen emotions? But I'll give the parole, the speech to Françoise and to Jerry.
My first reaction is it's not about mummified emotions. It's about mummies, dead. Because what struck me was his gift to be in relationship with people who are bereaved and grieving. But he comes back from there as if he was the dead person. He has an ability, like a gift, you could say. Of course, it's not very, very common, to take on himself or to be porous or to be, so he can help people. But then what do? You, the analyst, when he brings you the mummies of the dead people he met. So it's, for me, Jerry knows how I always think we have an overdose of emotions. I always think, while we are, and I stop, facing rather what is shown to us, a mummy. And the mummy is a ritual which is not finished. Usually Egyptians, they put the mummy into beautiful sarcophages and pyramids and so on and so on. And that's your job. Where are you going to enterrer, to bury those people? And second, I had another thing. Well, I forget for the moment.
So, mummy. What about you, Jerry?
Well, my first thought is mommified emotions.
Mommy, M-O-M-M-Y.
Huh? Sorry?
M-O instead of M.
Mommified.
What? I cannot understand the difference. What is
C'est
the...
la mère au lieu de mamie.
Mummy.
Mommified emotions.
Mummified in French.
And, I'm sure there's much to many ways to look at this situation. But, there's also a kind of fairly straightforward Freudian reading of the situation. Here's a man whose father leaves him when he's very young and leaves him with a very distraught, emotional mother whom he can't successfully take care of. She has to turn to alcohol. And, so what's the implication of this? Well, one implication is in that first go around of the therapy, what he discovers is he has a right to a life. It sounds like he thought, for whatever reason, maybe because his father wasn't there to give him a right to life, that he didn't have one. And what I find interesting about this third go round is that, in a sense, the triggering situation is, I think it's a quote, by silent agreement, he performs the duties of his supervisor. read as the context of a little boy who has to be the father in the family by silent agreement. He may be right back in that early childhood situation. And what does he do? He has to tell the bereaved families that their father isn't coming back. I mean, it seems to me there's something about his current situation and role in the military that's way too close to his childhood role.
Hmm.
And in various ways, he's suffering with that. So his motions are mummified.
I have a question about the first wounds he received. That was before the invasion? In what circumstances? And he saw somebody die in front of him. When was that?
Oleksandr, we have a question.
I'll be brief. So they were in the front line. There were a few of them, a small group, and they were at the front line, but they were cut off from information because that was at the very start of the war, November 2014. And so they were told that they should run because that area was going to be shelled, or just move, relocate. So he was almost paralyzed with fear because he understood that they were virtually trapped. And his friend, who was sitting next to him, said, "Let's run." Allegedly said, "Let's run." So he got up and made a few steps, and his friend was killed on the spot. The friend stood up and made a few steps, and he was killed on the spot. But he was just sitting there, and he suffered a wound to his leg with shrapnel, and he was found and taken to hospital. So he was demobilized after that.
But that was in which year? You saw him at that time? Because you started in two.
That was in 2015.
Yeah, and you saw him since you saw him? He was in therapy with you?
Він тоді був в терапії у вас? Yes, he came back for rehabilitation. He went to his family, back to his family, and his wife said, "Let's get divorced," for the same reason. Because the first time she wanted to break up with him before marriage, and this time after they were married and had 2 kids. He came to me for advice because he was in the process of his divorce. So he came to me to ask how to plan his life, his further life. So he addressed me like he would his grandfather. Like he had this transference as on his grandfather on me.
Don't you think that when his friend was killed beside him, he could have thought it could be me, and I should have been dead and mummified at his place? That happens.
No, that's not what he believed back then. He was just frozen. He started praying, and that's when he understood that perhaps there's God, because he should have gotten up and run along with his friend, but he was just frozen, and he believed that God had helped him then. And so he became more religious after that accident, after that event.
But it's like Bion when he says, "I died in Amiens, I died in Cambrai." You know, Bion, when he came back and his crew was dead, he said, "I died." So was it a part of this mummification? That is my question.
And
He did not really feel it back then. That was a different story. He started feeling mummified while doing this work of the herald of death after. And before that, he really wanted to come back to his family. He did not know she wanted to leave. And after his rehabilitation was over, she told him that she'd had enough and she wanted a divorce.
I mean, it seems to me that it's a story about, in a way, his being saved physically from great harm by his restraining his impulses. His buddy says, "Let's run." He doesn't. His buddy does, and dies. So in a way, it fits in with his overall, let's say, personality structure, that control and caution are the best way to go.
Mm-hmm. But I agree with you, Jerry, that, but I wanted to add something because it also reminds me of a case we heard probably a year ago where the buddy also died. The soldier we heard about was alive and his body died. And I don't know if you remember that case.
Yeah.
And it seems to me, I mean, another part of being mummified is that you're also, I mean, your organs, you know, the Egyptians took out the organs of the dead person, but then they stuffed it, you know, stuffed the sarcophagus with all the things that this person loved. So I'm with Françoise that I think he then stuffed his emotions not to feel any of the guilt for having survived this attack by, as Jerry said, by not running, by doing the same very passive thing he's done all his life. But I think that didn't make the guilt exactly go away.
Besides, the fact that you don't run and you stay is an animal reaction. You play the dead. It's not a lack of something. It's one of the survival reactions that Bessa van der Kolk enumerates: fight or flight, or play, or not play, but you look dead. The predators are not interested, or you submit. But this way to be dead alive is a survival method. So I think he is very much struck by this experience.
And remember, Françoise, what you remembered in the case a year ago?
Which one?
The young guy, there were two guys, and they were also running, and one was shot dead, and the friend survived and also was mad at the commander for telling them to run when it was dangerous. And he then had symptoms of stuttering and things like that. And you said it was really important that the surviving body would find a symbolic way of maybe at the spot where his friend had died, create a symbolic way of marking his death.
That was done by some person who presented a case.
Right.
You remember?
This reminds me of him.
The
And
guy
really,
went
he's
to
not doing it for this body, but he's doing it on a daily basis for the families who, whose dependents died, but he hasn't done it for himself. So how is he gonna unfreeze if he's only doing it for others, but not for the loss of this man that he was close to?
But I was, thank you, Jeanne, but I was.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who's asking?
I'd like to say two words. after that last discussion, I just had this really acute feeling that perhaps he comes as this herald of death.
Excuse me, he comes as
He comes as this messenger of death
Okay.
to try to compensate for his feeling of guilt for his body. And another feeling that I have, I would like to address you all. Find this key phrase which can stop this mummification. Like in previous therapy, there was something that clicked. And here I just don't know what to tell him. I'm really lost. And I'm hopeful that this phrase can be found. I realize that this is my view of this, my imagination, but I am looking for that phrase, for something to say to.
Well,
Can I ask a question? I'd like to ask a rhetorical question to Professor Filts and his colleagues. How can we imagine a feeling of a person in their defenses when they every day have to go and notify their relatives of the death of their loved ones? Is it possible to observe emotionality? What are the defense mechanisms that can be helpful in not to get mummified? Maybe that's the only way to deal with that. I believe so too.
I want to jump in there. I agree with you completely. You know, it seems to me that he's managed for the moment to persuade himself and you, Oleksandr, that his emotional drying up is a problem. But in fact, it's a solution. It's a solution. And he tells you that it's a solution to the work he finds himself having to do. He says, I thought I could cope with grief, but I can't. If he were dried up, he could. He says he has to deal with the aggression of the bereaved. He has to deal with guilt he can't contain. So I don't think he actually is emotionally dried up. I think he's striving to be emotionally dried up so he can survive this. It's a solution, not a problem. Although it's also a problem if he wants to have a life. I'd be careful about looking for kind of magic phrases here. But if I had to choose one, I might say to him, why are you doing this and not your supervisor? He's the one who's doing his supervisor's work. Why?
Well, by your theory, because the supervisor is his father, right? He's already done his father's work who left him, and yeah. We have two hands up, please. Yeah.
My name is Maria Kovalova. I have some thoughts I would like to share. I would not take on the courage to say that I know this phrase, but maybe my text could help in some way. From the first episode about this man, I had this idea that he might be this type. For whom it's normal and characteristic. The way he was formed in his personality is akin to his model of his family. This confused mother who uses alcohol and who he's embarrassed of. And on the other side, there are good objects, reserved and tolerant, main grandparent. On the outside, he demonstrates this, but inside, I have this feeling that there's this desire for love of his mother, but also inability to justify and excuse her alcoholism, etc. And he was tempted to be alive, but this strategy didn't really work because his wife sort of betrayed him in this context. And this guilt that is probably there, we hypothesize about that. But if it's there, there's this desire to excuse his mother and to allow his love for his mother is atonement. It means you have to atone for her sins and accept punishment in his mother's stead. So if we suppose that this is true, then in this episode with his combat buddy, this guilt would also resonate. This is guilt that has to be atoned for, and he is trying to carry the weight he can't really carry, which is heavy for him. It's not that he has the wish to kill himself. He just wants to carry this atonement to the logical end, which is killing himself. So unconsciously, he is killing himself.
Mm.
And if we were to turn to, and I also wanted to say that perhaps he wants to be big because he is inconspicuous, etc. And by taking on this heavy weight and by killing himself, he is making himself greater. Carrying this mission impossible. And if we were to turn this, well, the warmth of his love for his alcoholic mother, who he is ashamed of, but who is nevertheless a person he loves, can just turn it the other way and bring some light to this mommy, some warmth. This is what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Дуже дякую.
He needs to unmute. Can you unmute yourself? Oksana, can you help me? Because
Yeah.
yeah, thank you.
Il est là.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oleksandr.
I would think that this mummification perhaps is one of his ways of survival in that situation. But what do you do with the other side of this? Because he seems to understand it and seems to say in this, that because I am emotionally mummified, I cannot afford to be with a woman who clearly loves me. I know she loves me, and she loves me unconditionally, and I also like her, but I just cannot allow myself to be with her because I might not have any emotions, and that's a tragedy for him. So maybe we could say something about this, because I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, well, I think,
Alexander, we have two more hands up.
У
So
нас ще є дві руки підняті.
Huh?
Should I respond or not? Should I wait?
Would you
Jeanne,
cut?
should I wait?
Yeah, my problem is I cannot pronounce the names of the two women who have had their hands up. So I do want them to give a place and then maybe come back to you. Is that okay? But Oksana has to help me with the names.
Yeah.
Maybe Jerry could answer to what
Oh,
you said.
shall I do that?
Yeah,
Jeanne?
okay, do it.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. I
Well,
don't want to mummify you, so sorry.
yeah. Oh, am I muted?
No.
Well, in a way, Oleksandr, I don't think, given my limited understanding of this, that the first thing to think about is why he can't be with this new woman. I think in a way right now, his not being with her is a casualty of his conflict, his inner conflict. And the inner conflict, I'm hypothesizing, relates to the reactivation of his childhood situation, where he is doing the work of his father with terribly painful emotions all around him, in the form of the people whom he has to give the message to about loss, and that's too much. In a way, it's a measure of his emotional capability, his responsiveness, that it is too much. So in a way, he's trying to dampen down his emotions as a way of dealing with this terrible job he has to do for somebody else. And the casualty there is he doesn't have emotional availability for this new woman in his life. I mean, that's one reading of the situation. Now maybe maybe this is also, maybe his emotional unavailability is what he learned in his growing up when he's with a very volatile, emotional, alcoholic mother, a way of protecting himself against being too close to a woman. But I would first of all think about the situation, the work he has to do as the messenger of death, and how difficult that is. The fact that he's doing it for somebody else, and the way this must link up with what things were like for him when he was growing up.
And
Yeah.
I would just add quickly, we don't know anything about the story of that mother. You know, she's dropped like alcoholic. Okay, she is alcoholic. What happened to her? We have no story, no history. I stop there.
So I need to start respecting the people who have been having their hands up. Can we start again? I'm asking Oksana to help me with the names.
That's Olga.
Yeah, Olga. Okay. See, I unfortunately don't read Ukrainian, so I'm unable to pronounce your name. I'm sorry. Yes, Olga, you've had your hand up a long time.
Okay, this was sort of woven into my association, Jerry said, because all the time while the discussion went on, I was thinking, I was trying to listen into this mummification of emotions, what Oleksandr was really emphasizing. Not freezing, but mummification. And the images that surfaced in that was the cacti and the enchar tree, that's the poisonous tree. So cacti is way to protection in order to save life, it has to become dried up, seemingly unalive, but inside there's life that's preserved, and this life is actually in the thorn, in the prickly thorns. And I was thinking about aggression and viability, or livening. What can be this moisture or this water that can revive the mummified thing? And I was thinking about the enchantment with the poison dripping off it, and that people who were sentenced to death had to go and collect the poison to put on arrows for it. And so these images were between aggression and life. Where is aggression of this person? And I was thinking about mummification and mummy with an O, mummification, about this wordplay with the mother. Some anger at his mother that allowed all of this to happen. And she was drinking and she abandoned him. And I was thinking that being a herald of death is also aggression and wrapped in this. This is a quote unquote revenge he brings to the whole of these people about death. And it's like he's saying to his mother, this mother is dead. He's left us. There's no one here except you. And where are you? Turn to me. And images that we have to look for solutions through livening. Maybe you should do it through this transformed and hidden and mummified aggression that he has.
Thank you. I like the cactus metaphor. Yes, Tatiana Meditska.
Yes, I raised my arm because I wanted to turn your attention to this detail. When you were reading that you made a slip of a tongue, you said after divorce, after anger between, so it sounded like after this rage between the parents. So that this resonates with what Olga was saying about aggression. Did I say that? Yes, you said not divorce, but raging of the parent. That's interesting. I didn't notice that. And another free association is that about this alcohol, like drowning grief in alcohol, right? And it's like his mother was drowning her emotions in alcohol. And also people at the TCC, at the conscription center, do the same. And he refuses to use alcohol. It's as if he's not drowning his grief and his emotions with alcohol. So what else could he use to drown his grief and his experience? He gives no fluid, so it gives nothing to drown, and that's why he's drying up himself. Interesting.
Mm. Thank you, Michael. Mr. Saint-Exupéry.
No, we don't hear you.
Can't hear you.
Muted.
We can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you, Oleksandr. Fascinating. Thank you. Thank you, Oleksandr. This is very interesting to learn about a man who, with history, who can tell you something about early history and then these chapters that you're providing us. I find myself agreeing with everybody, but maybe I have a couple of thoughts that might push things further. I might have a phrase for you, but I agree with Jerry. I think, like transitional objects, you will find your own words. You will find your own magic phrase. Um, yeah, but I understand the wish. First, to Jerry's point, I think this man, I my instinct and my intuition suggest he was abandoned by his father. And I think that's quite likely the primary trauma, if you will. And I quite agree with Jerry when he said that his current symptom is a solution to a different problem. And one way of approaching that might be, of course, if he can become curious about what this is a solution for, he likes instructions, I'm sure, and he might be able to accept that invitation to think about himself differently. I think he also had a postpartum mother, and this I want to speak to Françoise' suggestion that we don't know about this mother. And if we only say she's an alcoholic, any story has collapsed. And Françoise, I think that's what you're bringing to this. I'm sure he had a postpartum mother. Of course he did. And in all likelihood, if her husband abandoned her with the birth of this son, we've got dyads and triangles long before he's even eating solid food. So I think those early traumas are so deeply ingrained as to be something of that this man exists in a sarcophagus. That's how we say the word in English. It's a wonderful word, of course, because it's Latin. And I see him and its early development as a role reversal. He is the replacement father, but I see this as a role reversal with a dead mother. And I think this, in a way, is where he's stuck. This is the level he reached. And in a way, I hear the story as this is the level where he is, that's status quo. That, and now the mother is internal, of course. She's dead, but I still hear him as struggling to maintain his attachment to her through identification with deadness, a la a dead mother, deadening his internal feelings. I love all the classical metaphors, of course, and we have all that we need here, I believe. We don't need jars with his internal organs because he's deadening his feelings. He's Oleksandr, you impressed us at how exquisitely attuned he is to other people, which is what's required of a child who has a dead mother. But he's deadened to his own internal states. I saw that as both the relationship with his internalized dead mother, but I get the sense that there is also, as we might expect, illusion, omnipotence, and a false self that characterized by perfectionism of a sort. He goes into law. All young boys abandoned by their fathers go into law because there's a case that needs to be prosecuted. And in our country, we're experiencing that. I see that in my own patients individually who are going to law school. But they also want to prosecute the case against the father of our country right now. I'll end quickly. And in this relationship with a dead mother, there's an endless repetition compulsion around this heralding of death. Of course, who told him what happened, what his father did, or what happened to his father? I don't claim to have an answer, but it does seem almost hidden in plain sight, if you will. And finally, to push this false self a little further, and the mummified issue, you know, I believe the point of mummifying is for the afterlife. And he can't allow himself or imagine his afterlife. And I don't mean after he's dead, I mean after the death of, after so much death. So that's perhaps another word that might resonate. But the one that I have my money on is that he has a ghosted self. A ghosted self. There's a literature on that. You can look it up and I can help you find that, where he's been emptied like a mummy of his authentic self early on. And I'm thinking about Winnicott, of course, and his authentic self has been replaced by the subjectivity of his mother about him. She has emptied him, let's say, of an authentic self, and it's replaced with a ghosted self. There's a literature that you can turn to look up how to approach that, but as a phrase, even for you, I'm not sure we can help you. Like I said, you'll find the right phrase for him, but maybe we can help you, and maybe ghost itself will be helpful to you.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. I keep thinking, but you know, we can get to this later. I think with his ghosted self and this, you know, doing the job of the father who abandoned him, I think it's very interesting. I don't have an answer for that, but that
He's informing himself. I think he's informing himself of the abandonment.
But I'm thinking it's also interesting in the countertransference that Oleksandr feels himself to be the grandfather, not the father, but the grandfather. And what does that mean? But put it out there. Marina.
Thank you. You know, I have a garden, and when there are dried plants there, and sometimes I cut off the dry leaves, but sometimes it's fruits that are dry, and this plant provides no I was thinking about this dry roots, and we were talking a lot about mummification, but I also was focused on silent agreement and this heightened sense of justice. And I was thinking about this silent agreement between himself and his supervisor, as if it's related to the agreement in his childhood, when he knew his mother was king and she was indifferent, and everyone was no one knew what to do about it, but everyone just agreed on that. And I also thought a lot about his depression and as if they're not there, feeling acute feeling of justice. It's a constructive way, a kind of sublimation to go law school and to the military. It's a way to be with it, but also I have this impression that feeling of justice is not allowing himself to love another person, because as he has repeatedly told, he's not emotional enough, and he feels it's really unfair towards this woman who really loves him. He shows so little emotion. So I was thinking about justice towards himself. Where has it been lost? His self-justice. And maybe this huge feeling of justice, the anger, the aggression, is something he can do, but not something he willing to do. He has to do it. And maybe as a child, he didn't have much of a choice, but now he does. And I was wondering why it's him who is messenger of death, not his supervisor. And he doesn't have to be in the military. He has military. He has done enough. He has fulfilled his duty. And the last thing I want to say about the water, what I could really relate to. I thought of water as a pleasure because water is a way of for us to quench your thirst, to have to in order to live, but also to receive pleasure by quenching thirst. And I was thinking where his pleasure was, why he was willing to rid himself of his pleasure, because it has to be everywhere, not just in his work or social life, but also in his relationship. So I thought of this as a self-directed aggression, that I will not allow myself to love someone else. I have no right for loving someone else.
Beatrice.
Yes, hi. Thank you, Oleksandr, for this very, very lively presentation. But I would like to pick up where Jeanne, actually, you mentioned this, you're being the grandfather in the transference. And I thought that I would like to add to the mummification of the emotions, also the mummification of sexuality and desire, because it seems to me that by placing you as a grandfather, he's also, in a way, deadening you. And as we have spoken, and many of you have mentioned this before, that, sorry, I have to confirm my language here, that there is, of course, the question of the previous structure of this man, and it sounds very much like an obsessional structure who would put the analyst in the place of the dead. And so the question to me as much about him, how he can perhaps has to make a choice between being the angel of death, which is also a sexless creature, as we know, or to choose to actually engage in a relationship with this woman and perhaps abandon this job that he has in order to vote for the side of life and of desire. But the question is also how you can keep yourself alive in this treatment and not be mummified by this patient. So that's what I wanted to say.
Well, Beatrice, along with that, I do also think that there's quite an obsessive structure, because also in the way that he ends the treatment, takes a break, comes back to the treatment. So the way that he also uses Oleksandr to do a few years, then, then he's on his own, disbands you, and then he comes back. So I think there's a lot to be thought about, and about I think as Beatrice said, the you trying, Oleksandr, to keep alive, but being mummified by him, that you don't even feel yourself to be his father or brother or whatever. No, he didn't have a brother, but a father, something that would inject life in him. I think he's been quite successful at that.
Yeah. And yeah, life and aggression and sexuality and desire, because it seems to me he does have a choice. And he
Yeah.
opts for staying in this job, which requires this mummification of his emotions, as you all have pointed out. And I think that I would agree with that too. That is, he has to be able to mummify his emotions, because otherwise he would be, I mean, killing the messenger is saying that I think would acquire some truth in this situation, that the people's aggression to whom he is bringing these terrible news day in and day out, they also want to kill him as the messenger of death. So he's I think aware of this potential danger, and by mummifying his emotions, he stays out of that experience. But it seems to me that he could make a choice to change jobs and let himself be placed in a different position, but he seems to be very attached to this work that he's doing in some ways. So what's that attachment? And has he spoken about that?
I can answer.
Françoise, do you want to
And I
say
would,
something? Because then we have
job.
all that
I can answer about that job, which is a recognized, acknowledged job in antiquity, which was called in Greek psychopomp.
yeah,
People
exactly.
specialized as a messenger, as you say very well, between the dead and the
Yeah,
living. And it's a job. It's a sacred job.
it's a sacred job, yeah.
Yeah. So, but it has to be limited to that job. And to Oleksandr Filts' space, it has to be limited. You are the one to whom he can address that the ghostly self is in fact a relationship with the bereaved. And so it's a job. In the antiquity, some animals were specialized in that. The donkey. The donkey was psychopomp. And the golden donkey in Apuleius, which is a story of that beautiful story about that going to and fro between the living and the dead. So if he can be acknowledged, the magic sentence would be to acknowledge his gift, power. American Indian would say it's a power. It's not a less, it's a plus. If you could acknowledge it in a limited place, he could then have a life of his own, you could say private life, or because this job overwhelms him. But it's not to deny it to him. Some children are like that. Why should we think they are handicapped? Why do we put awful psychiatric or psychoanalytic words on that? It's a very, very, very old function. And it's positive. But then to acknowledge it with you in a very limited space could get him rid of it for the other aspects of life. For meeting women, he would not be overwhelmed. I stop there.
Doug.
Yes, well, thank you so much, Oleksandr. I'm just going with Françoise in that way that I've been thinking about the psychotherapeutic drive he has. Your patient has a psychotherapeutic drive, and like always, when we meet someone who is trying to make psychotherapy with us, we are we are puzzled because we are the psychotherapists. But I think he wants to help his mother. He was kind of wise baby wanting to help his mother, and he wanted to help also the the people he's meeting, and he wants to help you. I think he has learned so much about psychotherapy with you, Oleksandr. Then he wants to do psychotherapy with all the people he's meeting when he is going for his job, and he has chosen like a job like you. But yes, like Françoise said, everybody needs some rest also to go ahead with this really heavy job. But thinking about the phrase, sometimes yes, like Françoise said, acknowledge that he wants to help, and he wants to help also you dealing with all the stories that you listen to. And well, something like we're doing the same job.
Alexander, you've now heard so much. I want to give you some space. And you also wanted to tell us, I think, at the beginning, but maybe you have to do it at the end, a little bit about the current situation in Ukraine. But first of all, I want to hear from all the suggestions and observations you got, what you think.
Well, you know, I was listening, and every time we present cases, we start seeing the cases from a little different perspective than in therapy. And I think that every presentation is valuable because such perspective and that in group supervision, these things are opened up, and I have this feeling I was presenting him a really strange feeling. I had this feeling that I was presenting him in kind of a one-dimensional space with a clear life history, and so he reached the point where he needs to mummify himself emotionally. And I was thinking, by inertia, I guess, maybe, so if I managed to help him twice and praise, maybe this could also work this time. But this is just my wish. And in reality, the situation has become so multi-dimensional that I am sitting thinking that that one single phrase won't work. It's not one word solution, one phrase solution. I think it's where I need to adopt a stance where I will have to turn his story to the sides where neither of us are willing to go. For example, yeah, about what about his aggression? He cannot have no aggression at all. And about his constrained libido. And what is he doing to me after all? What is he? Maybe he is playing some unconscious role with me as well. And in order to perhaps be able to cope in this situation, I guess I thought that we should see each other more often. And I'm actually not able to do that due to external circumstances. And I thought that I would probably like, you know, I told you that he got back with his father at 30. And I think that perhaps I should move from the stance of his grandfather to the stance of his father and say that, you know, things might have worked like this in childhood, but the adult life is different. And using the same recipe, we've been using for 17 years might not be enough anymore. Maybe we should look for other solutions. And if this woman unconditionally loves you and tells you about it, and you cannot respond to her, although you like her, but you're afraid that you are going to deaden her. And then I have this word in mind, perverse. And this is, I thought that this whole theory that has been opened up here, I don't know. I guess it sort of knocked me off my position, because it was very, very straightforward about finding a phrase. But now I think that maybe it takes more than one phrase. And I wanted to say that all the thoughts were really interesting. Thoughts about his mother and his father, and him not being able to help his mother. All thoughts have been very interesting. And maybe he's trying to play therapist towards me. Well, he's an old man. Maybe this old man is trying something and he's not able to do anything any longer. Maybe that aspect is also present. That was really interesting. And I'd like to thank you, because I was just there thinking. And yeah, even ChatGPT seems to be very smart, is not really helpful in that situation. But thank you very much.
Alexander, I was thinking too, yeah, like Beatrice and I said, you know, how was he successful in turning into a grandfather? You know, you could be a much younger man. But I thought also now at the end, somehow it played into the whole thing that you actually have been waiting to present this case for the entire last year. And you've always given other people the place and the chance to present instead of you. So I think that somehow plays also into the situation where we're now, that finally you were able to be the messenger of this case and really opened up in all of us many, many different perspectives and voices. So thank you very, very much.
Jeanne, could I add something there?
Yes, obviously.
Yeah, I was thinking about the countertransference, Oleksandr. At a very simple level, it's, I need a magic phrase to help this man, and I feel helpless without it. I mean, at a very simple level. And I hear that in a couple of ways. One is helplessness, a feeling he's creating in you. And I wonder where that is in him too, his helplessness to actually make something better for various people. The other way I hear it is he pulls for a wise older father. He wants that, a wise older father. But I think that protects him a bit from a genuine father hunger that's also very ambivalent. A father hunger toward a man who left him, who did not come through for him. So there may be many feelings. If you were in the paternal transference, you might have many negative feelings directed toward you out of a sense of hunger too. So I would, you know, that's what I find myself thinking. But about you took this last chance, this, you know, during this session, this term to present. I'm so struck with how people took this last chance to speak up and have a full discussion, which was just great, really great. So thank you all.
Françoise, one last word.
I like very much Alexander metaphor with a tree. And I heard, you know, we could expand, because it's You say a tree that is unremarkable, but at the same time, they are remarkable by that fact. And not, as you say, as arrogant and lofty trees, but it's life. And I think this metaphor is very, very useful for him. I like trees.
So one last thing before
Thank you for saying this.
before we end is, I just see in the chat that Dirk Söderström announced that next year, July 26th, Oleksandr will be the keynote speaker at the ISPS conference in Lausanne. And Françoise is going to be his discussant. So the 6th to 8th, so almost exactly in a year, right? So put this in your calendar and maybe we'll get to see one another all in Lausanne. So
Good.
thank you very, very much, everybody. Thank you, Oksana. Thank you, Peter and Eva Maria. Thank you.
Yeah, and Marine
And Jerry and you and Micah. So it was a wonderful discussion and hope to see you
wonderful.
very soon. So we'll meet again on, what did we say? On September 11th. Yeah, it's going to be our next meeting. So have a good summer.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Good night.
Bye. Bye, Alexander.